Welcome back. This is Hi Fam, and I'm Avital. Have you heard of the idea of following the child? Maybe you've even heard me say it in the past. And yep, there is a kernel of truth in this. And first, I'll definitely steelman this argument, but then I want to break down for you why this is not a good way of parenting on the whole and what we should do instead. Now, first, let's give the devil its due. I myself sometimes say this idea of following the child, and I think there are certain places where it really, really works. For example, in certain aspects of education, particularly when you're home educating and you have that flexibility, the idea of following the child's interests. So I've made videos about this, but say, for example, your child's really into Harry Potter, you could follow that interest and cater to the child's interest whilst also teaching them a wide variety of subjects. Like you could infuse math and English and science and history all through the lens of their interest. And that's fantastic. I think another way following the child is necessary is, for example, in child development. Many of us see those milestones, graphs, and charts from pediatricians' offices, and we feel stressed when our child is falling behind. And there's a certain necessity to understanding that each child is an individual and develops at a different pace. We sometimes need to slow things down or adjust our expectations to meet this particular child and their development pace and their temperament and their ability levels. And so are there aspects in which we need to follow our child? Of course. But overall, I think that this statement gets pretty overblown. And what it tends to start to mean is that we start to treat children like little adults. And we start to see children like shrink down adults who have all of the abilities, the insights, all of the skills, all of the experiences that adults have. And that is simply not true. And what I find here is that this is simply unfair to our children. I think it's really appropriate to respect children, to take their preferences into account, to be empathic towards them, even when it seems like, oh, that's just a childish concern, but we're going to show them empathy because for them it's a big deal, to be really polite and gentle and warm and loving, and to try to make their life as joyful as we can, right? To try to follow where we can. Children don't get a lot of control over their life, and there are some key areas where we can follow the child completely. One of those key areas, perhaps the key area, is in their play. And I teach parents how to encourage and foster independent play because this is precisely the place to follow the child. This is precisely the place for the child to develop their imagination, to be the directors of their own show, to really follow their own hearts and to not be directed or told what to do or expected to be obedient. And I think reclaiming play is so important for children's well-being, mental health, and for parental well-being. And you absolutely should check out my course, Reclaim Play, because that is where you will learn exactly how to make that possible and to follow your child when it comes to play and really develop their muscle. But let's put that to one side. That is the place where it's appropriate to follow the child. Where it is inappropriate to follow the child is anything that has long-term consequences that the child can't foresee, anything that has adult consequences that influence our lives and, our finances, our marriage, our health and well-being. All of those kind of places is not the place for us to be asking a child what they think, what their opinion is, or to follow them. And I'm going to break down for you exactly what I mean by that and exactly why that is. And I want you to start to train your eyes to see how certain parenting philosophies, certain parenting gurus are always going to tell you to treat the child as though they are mini adults. They're not going to say it in those words, but they're going to say something like follow the child. They're going to say something like, your child might be wiser than you. Your child might know better than you. Your child might be your little guru, right? Might be someone that you need to follow them rather than them following you. And this is kind of twisted. It has it backwards. And I think it's deeply unfair to children. Children need our leadership. And we'll circle back to that at the end. But first, let me explain why they're not little adults. Anyone who has ever had a baby understands how tremendously, significantly, and meaningfully different babies are than adults. Babies are born with a huge dependency on adults for their very survival. And we see that so clearly, and I'm not sure why we ignore it in our philosophy in this kind of theoretical world. But no, babies are not little adults. Should we follow their cues? Yes. Should we be responsive to their cries? Yes. But are we the decision makers? Are we the ones who are there to take care of them and to protect them? Yes. And that is for many different reasons. It starts in babyhood, but it's still true for toddlers, for children, for tweens, and for teens. And here's the first thing, is that children don't have a fully developed prefrontal cortex. The most evolved part of our brain, the most recent part of our brain, and it's the part of our brain that is responsible for decision making, for understanding consequences, for long-term planning, for thinking things through, for building solutions. That is the part of the brain that our children do not yet have full development of, and they won't until their mid-20s, in fact. And so when you don't have a fully developed prefrontal cortex, you can't actually compare your level of executive function to that of a grown adult. You simply don't have the brain capacity to think through logical consequences and plan things out for the future in the same way. And that is why children are below the age of consent for many different things, right? They're below the age for sexual consent because they can't possibly plan and understand the consequences of such a massive decision, of such a massive change, right, in their life, or exposure, right? They can't make that kind of decision. That's why even if they're tall enough, they can't drive a car, right? Maybe when they're 16 or 17, I wish it was a bit later because, right, they don't yet have those abilities to make those kind of risk assessments that are, I'm all for children taking some risks, like climb up the slide backwards, but real risks where there's life and death involved, like sex, like driving a car, those are things we don't allow children, like carrying a gun or going to the military, right? No, these things don't wait till they're 25. We see adults primarily in most cultures as 18 and up, but even past the age of 18, they don't have the fully developed brain capacity to be able to fully think these things through. In fact, teenagers undergo a massive kind of rebuilding of the brain, and they sometimes behave like toddlers. They sometimes have tantrums. They sometimes have meltdowns. So when you look at your child and you think, follow the child, ask the child what our plan should be or where we should live, or let the child make medical decisions, or let the child make financial decisions, that's complete abdication of our role as the adults. The adults are categorically different than the children. And on a pure biological, technical, physical level, let's start with our brains. We're different there. And it's unfair to put those types of decisions on children. They're not equipped to make them. That's why children cannot decide for themselves what kind of schooling they should go through. They cannot decide for themselves what kind of medicalization they should go through or medical treatments they should go through. They cannot decide for themselves things for the family, like should mommy and daddy stay married? Should we move house? Should we buy this thing? Should I take my job? I so often see parents actually like consulting with their children over this rather than leading their children over this. And sure, I mean, once in a while, you want to get your child's opinion or preference, especially when you can weigh that in. But for the most part, you should keep their decisions very small, and the consequences of those decisions should be pretty inconsequential. Like, do you want the blue cup or the yellow cup, right? Like, you should not be able to decide much more than that when you're a child. Obviously, you get increasing responsibilities as you grow. But as I said, even teenagers are going through a massive rewiring of the brain. So it takes quite a long time before children should be making any consequential decisions that actually have, lasting effects on them or on their surroundings. If you have not yet subscribed, please hit the subscription and that notification bell so you are notified every time I drop a new video. And please make sure to like this video. I would love to hear your takeaway in the comments below. That helps me make this video more reachable to more people. So thank you so much. I also just love to hear your feedback, comments, and ideas because I'm here to serve you. I'm here to make content that is interesting and useful to you. So make sure that you give me the topics that you would like to hear in future videos. Leading on from this is children's ability to assess risk. So the prefrontal cortex influences their ability to foresee and predict consequences. And that is completely tied and linked to the second point, which is assessing risk. They can't really understand how bad a worst case scenario could be. They don't really understand what they could lose. This is why children can't gamble, for example, right? They don't understand quite how severe the consequence of those decisions could be. They can't truly assess the risk. Now, can they learn to assess smaller risks, as I've said, like climbing up the slide, that type of thing? Can they learn to use tools like knives and fire? Sure, with adult supervision and support. But those larger risks that have massive life consequences that we can, teach them gradually about, that takes their entire childhood to transfer the responsibility over those types of decisions. So they could learn maybe to use a knife, and maybe the risk there is going to be relatively small. You could get nicked, you could hurt yourself a little bit, but it's not a life or death scenario. With those bigger decisions, they can't do that for a long time yet to come. I mean, really, even teenagers and young adults are going to need quite a lot of support in understanding the long-term consequences. I mean, think back to yourself in your teens, in your early 20s. How much did you fully understand how your decisions would play out? Like going into debt for college or marrying someone. Look, I got married very, very young and I'm very happy with my decision. But these are the types of things that young adults need wisdom to help them with. They need their elders, they need the support of their parents to understand, is this a good decision I'm making? What will the long-term consequences of this be? And that's one pitch that I would make for long-term parenting, for invested parenting. That's not to be confused with prolonging their childhood and raising adult babies. No, I want them to be fully responsible and gritty and resilient and all of that stuff. But also, I personally am aiming to build a long-lasting relationship where, I still seek the wisdom of my parents on many decisions that I make. I still seek my grandma's wisdom on many decisions that I make. And I hope my children have that kind of intergenerational, looking backwards, looking upwards, whatever you want to call it, getting the guidance for the decisions they have to make too. They also don't have the motor development that adults have, right? They don't have the fine motor skills, the gross motor skills. You can't just follow the child's lead because you are there to protect them. You are there for their safety. If a child doesn't want to wear a seatbelt, you can't just follow their lead, right? You have to force them somehow. You have to convince them and then eventually force them to wear the seatbelt because they don't understand for their own good they must do this. Make sure you're not getting it twisted. Yes, they are little. Yes, they are more helpless. Like, sure, they have a lot of independence, they have a lot of strength, they have a lot of ability, they have huge potential, but they're still kids. And it's our role to protect them. Just as we have to enforce the helmet, we have to enforce the seatbelt, we have to enforce the toothbrushing. They need leadership from us. And they need leadership from us in every area of their life. Their safety, but also other areas of development, like their moral and ethical compass as well. Another point is that we are legally responsible for them for all the reasons that I've just mentioned. And because children cannot be held responsible for their actions, we are responsible for them. We're legally responsible for them. We're morally responsible for them. We're physically responsible for them. We're responsible for them in every single way. And that is as it should be. We should not be following the lead of the children. In fact, the reason that we are legally responsible for them is because we are their leaders. We have to actually take responsibility. We have to see the future, predict the consequences, assess the risks, do the physical things that are necessary in order to protect them. And we need to make sure that we are firmly in that leadership seat. If you're not so comfortable with leadership, by the way, and you want to learn how to be a strong and determined and a leader with conviction and confidence, then I invite you to join the studio when it opens at highfam.com/the studio. You can join the waitlist. The studio is all about building up that leadership as a parent so that you can create a strong family. But it starts here. It starts with not following the child, but rather owning that, yep, we're responsible for your development in every which way. And we're going to show up as leaders. We're not just going to follow whatever the child wants, whatever their preferences is, whatever the wind takes them this day. We're going to see them as children who don't know, who don't understand, who haven't fully developed. And we're here to lead them. We're here to show them right from wrong. We're here to show them healthy from unhealthy. We're here to show them effective from ineffective. We're here to show them how to lead a good life, what to do in a way that is going to bring the best results for them, how to optimize and set themselves up for success, how to make good choices. Please don't just leave your children in the fray and say, whatever you prefer, whatever you want, whatever you feel like, just follow your heart. Instead, show them what you believe. You have more experience than them. And that is probably the final point I bring you here today, is that adults simply have more experience. We have life experience. We've seen things, we've done things, we've made mistakes. Don't rob your children of your guidance. Don't steal that away from them. Don't hide it. Don't hold it back. Don't hoard it. Give your children the one gift that us adults need to give them the most in the world, and that is the gift of our guidance. So I'd love to hear what your key takeaway was from this video. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, and I'll see you in the next one. Keep on living that high fam life.